Welcome everyone to our discussion of Sefer Higayon. As we mentioned, Sefer Higayon is going to give us a deeper insight into the actual thinking process, whereas the basis or the basic unit that Derek Tfunos was involved in was the statement. Since we're interested in understanding what's being said has to have a subject and a predicate. So the basic unit that the Ramchal started with in Der Tfunos was the statement. But statements are made up of terms, and those terms represent concepts. So in Sefer Higayon, we're going to go to a deeper level, and we're going to investigate the concepts themselves. We're going to look at thinking, the creation of ideas, and once we understand the creation of ideas, then we'll understand how these ideas also get translated into statements. So we've often talked about the word-thought formula. You have a thought in your mind. You have to clothe it into words through a statement. That statement has to be spoken or written, and the hearer has to then recreate your thought from those words. But what we're going to concentrate here in Sefer Higayon is, in the beginning, is the world of thought, how thoughts are created, the sources of thoughts, and then we're going to talk about the different types of thoughts, and then finally the madregas, the levels of thoughts. We're going to try to make this as least heady as possible by giving examples, so that we can always stay concrete and try to fulfill our goal here. Our goal here is to learn Gemara and to understand Hashem's thoughts through the words that He uses in the Torah. So we don't want to lose sight of that. We're not trying to give a class in philosophy or logic per se. What we're trying to do is just understand how the mind creates ideas, how the mind expresses those ideas, so that we'll be better equipped to understand learning Hashem's Torah. That's our aim. Let's go to Tfunos. I'm sorry, that's not where I wanted to go. I'm sorry, Sefer Higayon. Oh, it's there. That is what I wanted to do. I'm sorry. Okay, just 1 second. Let's go here. Okay. That's interesting. There we go. Okay. All right. As a review, we always like to review because these concepts are subtle, and we always have to keep in mind the context of where we are. When you look at these charts that we've produced in the printed versions, they can become overwhelming. But if you take them in little bites, you can see that everything here is quite logical and quite orderly, which is the way of the Ramchal. So the last time we met, we discussed the sources of concepts. When you think about something and you conceive of something, where do those thoughts come from? Okay, so the Ramchal explained that there's 3 levels of abstraction. The basic level is what he calls muchash or murgash. Our thoughts are the product of the external world. We look at reality, we perceive reality through our senses, and through those senses we create the first level of thought. So if we go to the zoo and we look into the cage, we say, here is a lion. So we looked at, our eyes beheld something, a shape, a form, and we labeled it lion. Or Moshe, or any physical entity that our eyes can see. The second level of ideas, the source of ideas, we said was the muskal level. The muskal level is already an intellectual level where we've left the physical labeling of the item itself that we did in the muchash, and we go into the mind looking at items and creating an intellectual concept from them. And the Ramchal explains that this level has two parts. One he calls mufrad, and the other one he calls medumeh. The mufrad still exists in the physical world. What does that mean? If I look at the Moshe, okay, I say Moshe, okay, here's Moshe. Let me see, what color eyes does he have? Oh, he has blue eyes. What is the color of his skin? Oh, he has white skin. Okay, so the first level of abstraction is called the mufrad, where I take out from a quality out of something that I'm seeing, and I create a concept of it. Now, the concept isn't, unlike the lion, or let's say the lion who exists in the cage, his color does not exist in the cage. His color is a concept that I abstracted from looking at the lion, and I made a category, and this category, the Ramchal says, now becomes so strong that I actually think that there's something in the world called color that I attach to the lion, where really what I did was I abstracted the idea from the lion. But that being as it may, this level called mufrad means that I abstract from the reality a concept, first level concept called the mufrad, like color or shape or form. The second level in the muskal is he calls medumeh. Medumeh, in the book it was written speculative. I had a very nice discussion with my Chaver Reb David Sackton yesterday, and he's going to put out a new edition of Sefer Higayon with words which have more contemporary import. These words, the words we used in the original edition were the classical words that were translated into English around 100 years ago, so he's trying to update them. So we now change this level called medumeh. Instead of speculative, we call it imagined reality. Now, again, every word we use in English has certain connotations. So we're going to have to be careful and define what we mean, because the words that we're going to use do not exist in the same definitive form as in the common language that we use today. They don't really cover what we're trying to say. They sort of indicate what we're trying to get at. So the level of medumeh means that we're now going to leave any direct relationship with the reality in front of us. We no longer are going to deal with the lion per se, or some quality of the lion per se. What we're going to do now is create, for instance, a category. When we go from lion to animal, we look at lion and bird and man, and we say, oh, these three things can be labeled now as animal. That's a higher level concept called a musag. There we're in the medumeh world, in the world of the mind's imagination. Why is it the mind's imagination? When you go to the zoo, you'll never see a cage that has inside it the animal. You'll see bears and tigers and birds, and you'll then label them animal, but that's something that the mind has done. So that's why we call it medumeh. It's something created in the mind and does not have a exact referent in the physical world. So that's called a musag. A musag is a higher level concept that the mind creates when it looks at reality, and you're convinced that there's something called an animal, and we speak of it as if there is, but actually in the physical world, Hashem created dogs and cats and bears, and we created that concept called animal. The last concept is called Badawi, and as we mentioned, the Badawi is not the Musag, the Ramchal says. It's something, a different level of conception. In a discussion I had with Rabbi Sackton, so the way he learns it is it means fantasy in the sense of, for instance, when a person says there's a lion in the road, he says, Chazal says, the lazy person imagines all sorts of stumbling blocks in front of him. So he imagines, because he's lazy, that there's a lion in the road, and that's why he doesn't want to go out and do what he has to do today. So that's the world of imagination, of fantasy. That's what that's a level of conception which is totally within the mind to do. Okay, it's total imagination and has no real relationship to the reality. Okay, that was our discussion of the source of concept. Okay, now let's go to the second level. What we're going to do today, Bezrat Hashem, is we're going to discuss the types of concepts, not their source, but their types. And the Ramchal is going to describe to us that there's two different types of concepts. There's concepts which he calls an etzem, and there's concepts which he calls a mikra. Now, these words again have to be explained. In Yiddish we talk about a zach, or in English you say a thing. A thing in English is a little more ephemeral, but a zach is a thing, is something. That's going to be called the etzem when you talk about a thing. Now that thing doesn't have to be physical; it could also be a concept, but it's what you're talking about. The mikra is what happens to the things. The technical name is accident. Why does it mean that? If I talk about our friend the shore, for instance, okay, the shore, the ox. The ox is an etzem. What happens to the ox, whether he's goring or whether he's standing or whether he's sitting or whether we're using him for a korban or whether there's an iser to plow with an ox and another min together, that's going to be mikrim. That's going to be not the ox himself, but things that happen to the ox. So there's the zach, the ox, and then there's the mikrim, what happens to the ox. And we're going to define 9 different types of things that can happen to this ox. We can talk about his amount. Is there 1 ox, 2 oxes? Is he heavy? Is he light? We can talk about qualities of the ox. Is he dangerous or not dangerous? We can talk about actions that the ox does. Does he go out to do? Does he gore? Or does he kick? We can talk about the effect he has, the person who was gored or the animal who was gored. We could talk about the relationship of the ox to, for instance, money. How much does the ox cost? That's his relationship to an external thing called money. We could talk about zman, if we're talking about a cow, for instance, a korban, what age he has to be in order to be offered up. We can talk about the place that the ox is. Is he in a field? Is he in a place that's hefker? Is he in your private domain? We can talk about his orientation. Is he standing or sitting, squatting? It's one of the toldos of Kavanah Lahazik. Okay, and then we can talk about various kinyanim of the axe. Does he have an ol on him, for instance? Does he have a yoke on him? So we talk about the zach, the thing itself, the etzem, and then we're going to talk about etzems in these 9 categories. okay, in these 9 ways. These are the ways we talk about the various things that happen to things in our world. Okay, we talk about the actions, reactions, etc. As we do here.
So
Okay.
how does this, where does this fit in with what we were discussing until now? Whether
Okay.
it's a mortgage or a muskal.
Okay.
Is this
So
a separate tree?
this is a different aspect of musag. Before we were talking about the source of our thoughts. Where do they come from? When you build a thought, is the source of your thought the world of reality? Are you labeling something? Okay. Or is your mind now creating a level called animal, for instance? Okay. We were interested in the source in the beginning. Now we want to know about the object itself. When we talk about the cow or the ox, we now want to know what are the various variations that this animal can go through. What are the various aspects, what are the things that can happen to the animal? So we're really labeling the various activities that the animal goes through. So first we were talking about source. Where do your ideas come from? Is it a low-level idea right from the reality? Is it a higher-level idea of a category? Is it pure imagination? Okay, that's the source. But now we want to know about the item itself. Now, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter if it's for instance, it doesn't matter if it's the lion in the cage we're looking at or the concept of animal. Okay, it doesn't matter. We want to know now about that concept. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about degrees. When we talk about klal and prat, that's the last thing the Ramchal is going to do, and that's going to be the discussion of conceptual reality. Okay, source, different types of sources, and then levels. Klal and prat, the larger in the middle. Now, some of these things we have already discussed in Derek Tfunos, and I'm going to refer back to Derek Tfunos in our discussion to make it more tangible. Okay, and I hope that through giving our live examples in Nezikin, it'll also become tangible. Okay, what we're talking about, because as we mentioned many times, this is a new way of looking at reality. It's not changing anything, but it's just labeling reality or looking at reality a new way. And my example there, just to make a brief aside, when you talk about the study of grammar, okay, we all speak language, but looking at the structures of language is called grammar. To say that anything that you could say has to have a subject and a verb and a direct object, that's looking at the meta structure of language itself. So the same thing here, we all think. Some people think quicker and faster, more accurate than others, but we all think, or else we couldn't go very far in any activity during the day. The question is, we never really look at what we're doing and thinking. So the Ramchal now, just like in grammar looks at the structure of language, we're looking at the structure of thought. Okay, and that's what makes it a little unusual, because normally we don't look at the meta structure. We just do the thing itself through natural discussion. But in order to be accurate, the Ramchal maintains, we have to also understand what are the rules of proper conceptualization and reasoning. We need to know those rules, because a lot of times we can make mistakes. So he wants to have a checklist of things to use in order to make sure that we're not making either gross or subtle errors. Okay, so it's a little unusual because we don't normally do it, but this is the study that the Ramchal has presented to us. By the way, it's a very big chiddush what he's done. He's a master organizer. First of all, he's a master of the information, but he's also a master at organization. So he's really given us a view, which is, again, I have not been involved in the study of classical logical texts. My chaver has, and there's many places where the Ramchal has really given us a chiddush, not only in content but in organization. So this is where we're holding. Good. So here we are. let's go now to the text. Remember, uh, we're going to look at this concept of etzem and mikra, no matter where the concept came from, whether it's a low level of the lion or the animal, or we are now going to look at it and we're going to say, well, how can we talk about it? We have to talk about the thing itself, the zach, the etzem, and then we're going to try to talk about mikrim. And these mikrim can have more or less relevance within the discussion that we may be having. Again, the age of the cow may not be important in the Zikin, but may be very important in a korban, for instance. Okay,
so why wouldn't you translate mikra as variable attributes or something like that?
Okay, you could say that. You could say that.
Would that be, because that's what it sounds like, really.
Right, but it's the attributes of, as opposed to the thing itself.
Of the etzem.
Exactly, they're attributes of the etzem. I think attributes are fine. That's a fine word. The word accident just indicates that they're not always there. Whereas an attribute you might think might be there all the time, but these attributes come and go. Okay, that's why the word mikra is used. For instance, a man is not always standing, right?
Right, but he's always he's always in some sort of position. He's not, because he has to exist. So
Right.
He's either standing, sitting, laying, something. There is some sort of position.
Very good. And that's why you called it a variable, right? You said right. a variable of an attribute. But fine. That's very. By using those two words, you're covering the concept, I think, very well. Okay, great. So let's go into the Sefer itself now, and with that overview, and we will see the Ramchal's discussion. Okay, so now in chapter 2, he's going to talk about, in the beginning of the chapter here, there's a little summary, Etzem Mikra and its rules. So let's see how he defines it, okay? Ad heina ba'arnu inyanei hasaga u machlosecha. Until this point, we've talked about the concepts themselves and their various parts, okay? Ad tenevare hamusagim le Now we're going to talk about the musagim themselves. Before we just told you where they come from, but now we're going to talk about them. I don't care where they come from, if it's a low-level concept like the line or a higher level, but we have to talk about them. So he says now, kol musag is hu o etzem o mikra. It's either going to be an etzem or a mikra, okay? An essential, the substance of something or the quality of it. Okay, let's see how he defines it. Perisho. Ben hamusagim hamuchashim vehamuskalim shenisbar lamal. It doesn't matter if we're talking about low-level concepts like the lion or a higher-level concept like animal. No matter which level of concept we're talking about, it's either we're going to be talking about the etzem of the thing itself, the zach, the thing itself, or some quality that it has. What's etzem? Etzem hu hadavar hamamashii shi'amidu ba'atzmo v'lo ba'acher. She'amidaso ba'atzmo v'lo ba'acher. The etzem is the real thing. Doesn't matter if it's animal or lion, but it's the thing itself, and that's not dependent on anything else. It's an independent unity. Ubo, on this etzem, omdim hamikrim hamischabrim bo. On this etzem, we're going to put these various mikrim. As you said, very nice, I like that word, variable attributes. We're going to attribute things to this etzem. Perisho, derech mashal, ha'etzem. What's ha'etzem? Ha'even, ha'etz, ha'bal chai, the stone or the tree or the bal chai. Notice he took an example from a muchash, right? Ha'even, the stone or the tree, and then he gave an example from a musag, bal chai. V'kol hanimsaim ruchanim v'gashmim, and all the things that we find when Hashem created the world, whether they're spiritual or physical. So those are the etzem. I understand this as a object-oriented study. We're looking at the objects of creation, and now we're going to label them. So we speak about the objects of the etzems, the essential objects, and then the qualities of them. What is a mikra? Mikra hu inyan yemotze be'etzem ve'omed bo. It's something that's found in the etzem and is standing on it. V'lo yamod zulas etzem, but it has no existence beyond the etzem. It's a description, as you said, attribute. We're going to attribute, or we're going to recognize an attribute of this zach, of this thing, of the etzem. Derech mashal, hamarish zacharnu lamala. For instance, color that we mentioned above, yofi or chachma. These things, she'enam nimsaim b'fnei atzmo, they don't exist independently. Ella netunin be'echad min ha'etzamim. They're always found as part of some sort of substance, or some sort of thing. So another way, we have a few words here we're using to translate. Either we're going to call it substance. Some people would like to call it, in Yiddish I like the word zach. You could say in English thing. And then there's the attributes, what happens to the thing. Okay, and that would be the mikra. Okay, now he says like this. He gives us always a definition, and he tells us some rules. He says the mitzias of the mikra who hamischaber le'etzem. First of all, the reality of a mikra only happens as being attached to an etzem. Pirusho. Ki hine hamikra eno ela inyan hi os be'etzem. The mikra is only something that's found in the etzem. It's a bechina echas, very good as you said. It's an aspect. O bechinas rabos nosefes al hios etzem. Or it could be one or many aspects that are added to an etzem. Asher hios bechina hu nimsaim be'etzem. That these qualities are only coming to existence because of the etzem itself. Zehu hamikra shekora le'etzem. It's something that is happening to an etzem. So that's where, if you want to say the word variable, it's those variables that are happening to the substance itself. Hamikra. So that's the first rule, that it's a mikra is always something that's attached to the etzem. The mikra talui be'etzem ben behovaya bebavaya ben b'mitzius. The existence of a mikra is totally dependent on the etzem in existence and in reality. What does that mean? Perisho. Im lo haya inyan ha'etzem lo hayasa bechina nosefes lo. If there would not be a substance there, an etzem, so then you cannot talk about a bechina. It's a relative world. V'nimsa shelo haya inyan hamikra klal. So if you take away the etzem, then there's no such thing as a mikra just hanging there. Al kein nemra, the mikra tolui be'etzem b'hoveh, b'havaya. So an etzem has no, a mikra has no independent reality. It only has reality. It only comes into being when we discuss an etzem. You can't talk about measurement. You talk about measuring something all the time. Okay. V'chein im haya nehadar lo haya hamikra kora. And if the object disappears, so then you can't have the mikra. Al kein nemra she hamikra toli be'etzem mitzias. So we see that the mikra has no independent reality beyond. Let's go over that again. There's two different levels here. There's Havaya and Metzias. Havaya means it comes into existence because the etzem is there, and it has no Metzias beyond it's totally in Metzias on the etzem, which means when the etzem leaves, it goes away also. So its creation or its reality is only a function of the creation of the item itself, and it only lasts as long as the item is there. It doesn't have any independent existence. It's totally related to, dependent upon the etzem. Okay, these things will be important to us as we study Hekashim, as we study a lot of things. So right now we're just going to keep it in the abstract level, but we're going to bring it down to earth. Okay. Mikra bilti etzem nimna. He says a mikra by itself without an etzem is impossible. So the first rule was the first rule was that the etzem is attached to, a mikra is attached to an etzem. The second rule is it only exists when the etzem is there and it goes away when the etzem is not. And this one is that it does not have independent existence. Okay, a mikra building etzem nimna. A mikra can only come into existence when the etzem does. Hamikra lo yizgalgel, and the fourth rule is the mikra is lo yizgalgel minose lenose. You can't take a mikra that's happening with one subject and then move it to another subject. Okay, just because Moshe is standing, it doesn't mean that Shimon is standing. Okay, that it's totally dependent upon that mikra of standing is totally dependent upon Moshe. It could be that Shmuel is standing too, but there's no way that you can move one mikra from one subject to the next, because each subject has its own set of mikrim, things that occur to it. HaMikra lo yiskal minose lenose o mietzem etzem. It doesn't go from one subject to or one etzem. It's totally dependent upon the etzem that is. Perisho, here's its explanation. Ki ha'etzem hu sovel mikrim rabim. One etzem can have many different mikrim. V'yisobel mikra echad b'zman echad v'achar kach yisobel mikra acher. And it actually can have one mikra at one time and then later have a totally different mikra. Okay, so it could be hot at one time and it could be hot and it could be let's say hot and red, and then later on it could be cold and black, for instance. Okay. V'ha'etzem shesovel echad hu shesovel hasheni. So that etzem in Zman, that had one mikra, is the same etzem that had the second mikra. In other words, it could be hot and it could also have a color, but it's the same etzem. So the etzem itself can go through a lot of different changes and can even have different changes. At one point it could be hot, one point it could be cold, but it itself is the thing that is receiving all these mikrim. It's going through all these changes. Okay, that's what's happening. Hamikra shekor le'etzem lo yochel etzet mimenu u'lischaber el etzem acher. But a mikra that happens to one subject cannot leave that subject and go to another subject. Okay, just because just because Moshe is a chacham, it doesn't mean Shmuel is a chacham. Just because the fire is hot, it doesn't mean that the pan is hot. Okay, could be, but there's no. It's a different item, and therefore things that happen to it are different. What happened to the first item already left. And what's happening to the second item is something new and has nothing to do with the first. So because pot A is hot, it has nothing to do with pot B being hot. What happens to pot A could be hot now, could be cold in another 2 minutes, and pot B can still be hot. So it's a totally different happening or occurrence, or as you want to say, variable is happening to the second etzem that happens to the first. And you can't logically switch the variables that are happening from one to the other. Okay, it may be that the two variables are happening simultaneously, but by definition, logically, what happens to one item does not logically force to be happening to the second item. It can be, but it's not forced. So that's the discussion of etzem and mikra concepts, no matter which level they are either the substance. That's what we say. Etzem really comes from the bones, the skeletal structure. On the skeletal structure, we're going to hang a lot of things. We're going to put skin. We're going to put color. We're going to put clothes. We're going to put a lot of things on. But the etzem is the item itself, the mannequin, and then on that mannequin, we're going to talk about it by adding different occurrences. Aspects, what you call them, variable attributes to that etzem. Okay, so that's the definition of etzem and mikra. Now he's going to define the different variables that can items, substance, etzem, can go through. He says like this. Kva ba'arnu mikra b'klalo. We just discussed, by the way, the Ramchal always gives you a little summation of what he did in the previous chapter, and then he tells you what the next chapter is going to do. It's very, very misudar. So he says, Kva ba'arnu ha-mikra b'klalo. We just explained to you the mikra and its general concept, what it is, nosef on. It's something added to the etzem and only has existence with the etzem. But now we'll tell you what are the different types of variables that any subject can go through. What are they? So he explains that the chelkei hamikra tisha. There's 9 different variations, mikrim, that a subject can go through, an object can go through. What are they? Kamus, Eichus, Pu'ula, Hefel, Yachas, Zman, Matzav, Kinyan, and Ano. These are the 9 things. Now, what we're going to do here is refer us back to Derek Tfunos. Oops, I'm not going to use that one. Let's see if I have it nicely here. Here we go. Here you remember our Derek Tfunos chart, and we spoke about the structure of language. We said that the basic unit there was statement, and that we're going to talk about what our focus there is what is the statement, what was the subject and the predicate, and what is it doing? Is it a kasha, teretz, tshuva? And then what's the proof of the statement? Those are the 3 boxes that we investigated very deeply in Derek Tfunos. At the end of Derek Tfunos, he talks about the havchanot, and he describes that the subjects that we're going to be dealing with are going to be spoken about in 24 different ways. We can talk about any subject, we can label a subject in 24 different ways. Now, in Higayon, as we said, he's going to take a deeper look at those 24 ways and not only look at them individually, but he's going to reorganize them. So if you see here the 24 havchanot at the end of Derek Tfunos, what I did in pink here is I showed these 9 mikrim. The ma'us is the etzem, then he's going to talk about the qualities, the echos, the kamas, the amount, the pula, the action that things do, the result of their action, the hefel, the roshem, the mischaber. So what he did here is, if you notice, he has changed the order of presentation when that he had in Derek Tfunos, and he also is going to divide the subject of havchana differently. Okay, so why and how I'm going to leave. That's an advanced discussion of why he put the order he did in Tfunos. That's an advanced discussion which Bezrat Hashem will get to. But here what I'm going to do is, what I just want to point out is, it's going to be these havchanot that we're going to be looking at now in a deeper way in Sefer Gayon. Okay, and now we'll be able to handle them in a much more precise way than we were able to in Derek Tfunos. Okay, so we've abstracted those into these 9. Now, what I've done now also, and I will be doing, Bezrat Hashem, is I have the Sefer Higayon linked to Derek Tfunos. So when we discuss one of these bechinot, we'll look at Derek Tfunos and we'll see the link back to the Gemara. So we'll again be grounded in the concrete, which I always like to do, because this is not a discussion, as I said, of a logic class or a philosophy class. We're only trying to understand how to learn and to be more precise in our learning, and also to have a language, a precise language that we can communicate with, so that we both be on the same page, both be on the same concept. So when we're discussing something, we're discussing it with each other and not talking about two different things altogether. Okay, so here we go. Kvar Ba'arnui says, HaMikra B'klalo. I just explained to you the Mikra in its general aspects. Now I'm going to tell you the parts. What are the different types of Mikra? Chelke HaMikra Tisha Vehem Kamas Echas Pula Hefel Yachas Man Matzet Kinin and Ona. Let's go through them with the Ramchal. Kamas. Kamas means how much, the amount. Kamasu hamikra yeshoa bo hadavar. It's a thing that measures something. Ubavoro sha'al kama. And because of this mikra, we always ask how much. How much does it weigh? How much is it worth? How big is it? Now, the yischalek l'shnei chalakim, he divides kamas into two parts. One is called kamas davak, and one is called kamas nifrat. The kamas, ha'echad is the first one, ha'echad. Hamida she karuhu kamas davik. It's the measurement that we call kamas davik, a continuous measurement. We're going to go into tfunos in 1 second. And the second one is called the kamas nifrad. It's measurements that use unit measure instead of linear measure. Perisho. Here's its explanation. Ki ribui hachalakim v'hadavekim ze lezeh osim guf bal shiur shiyochol limdo v'zeh ma shekivnu ba'omram kamas davek. There's so many little small pieces that create one body, and one body of measurement that we measure, and that's what I mean by kamas davek. So, for instance, when I have a pound of sugar. Okay, you have all these little grains of sugar, but we don't count the grains. We talk about it as a unit of weight. We don't say there's each grain is 1.05 of a gram or an ounce, but we look at it as one unit. Okay, so that's kamas davak. Or we look at the kamas davak can also be a spatial measurement. We're going to see in a second in the Ramchal there from us. Okay, the ribuim haperu zemizeh molid mispar. Now, when we have a lot of separation, we create a number from it, and that's what we mean by kamas nifrat. So I say that there's 3 eggs or 4 eggs. Let's look at his definition in Tfunos. And here in Tfunos he says like this. It happened within the 4th one of his havchanos. It's the midah b'ma sheshayach. And in kamas he says it's the midah b'ma sheshayach midah. It's measuring something in terms of measuring or the amount in, as I said, linear measure or discrete measurement. And he gave examples here. Derech mashal. Hare zeh mekadesh sheishes ama l'kol ruach. When we talk about the Klayim, and Klayim makes usher 16 amos on each side. So we talk about a spatial measurement. Okay, that's called a kamas davuk, or harihu makadosh arbi mechamisha gafanim, or 45 individual plants become aser. So there we're talking about the nifrad. So I could talk about either the individual units, unit measurement, or I could talk about continuous measurement like space, time, or speed is speed. So that's when we talk about the amount of something, we can talk about either linear measurement or a discrete measurement number. Okay, the second one, now this second one of Eichus, he's going to go into a very, very detailed explanation of Eichus, and I'm going to show that to you right now. This is going to be the one that he speaks about the most, okay? He's going to define 4 subcategories of what he calls how, of the howness of an object, the eichus, the qualities of an object, and he's going to talk about kinyanim, their abilities, like in man, he'll speak about all of the different qualities that man has, that he acquires, okay? He has abilities to do theoretical things and practical things and mechanical things. We'll get into all those details. Then he has certain physical abilities, okay, sharpness of mind, his body is healthy or not healthy, he's either quick or alacrity, so that talks about his physical abilities, not his mental abilities. And then we're going to talk about temperament. Now, temperament is hachana is going to exist not only in man, but is going to exist in even animals and non-living things, whether they're hot, cold, wet, or dry. That's the condition that they're in. Okay, and finally, he's going to talk about different types of surah, different types of form. Okay. Oops, what did I just do there? Oh, wrong, I hit the wrong button. Okay, so I have this chart. I'm going to go through it slowly together. And by doing, Baruch Hashem, this Visio chart, we're not going to get confused. We're going to go step by step, whereas when you read the book without the chart, you can quite easily get lost with all the details. So now we're going to talk about Eichut, the quality. Before I discuss Eichut in detail, I would like to just go quickly to Tfunos to show you his brief discussion of that in Tfunos. In Tfunos, he said this: the bechina of Eichut, he hatechunat hanose umezego. It's the quality of the subject and its condition. For instance, kagon, imhu kar v'imhu cham. Is it cold or hot? Is it wet or is it dry? The marashabo, is it yellow, green? Is it a certain form? Is it a square, a circle, triangle? Chosko v'chalsho, is it strong? Is it weak? Ukiyotzibo. And he gives examples. The chitzon was Adam and the panini was Lavan. When we talk about the veshet, so the inside was red and the outside was red, the inside was white. Or Ashune havut sama hagidim, rechichim, lo havut sama hagidim. When the Gemara tries to define what's the tzomas hagidim, it says that the hard part is the tzomas and not the soft part. So those are qualities of. So when we talk about eichus is a very large box. We're talking about qualities that a item possesses. Okay, but we're not going to talk about its measurement, and we're not going to talk about its movement. We're going to talk about the qualities of color, of hardness, of softness. Okay, now he goes into, now we're going to go back to Higayon, and he's going to talk about this in much more detail. Okay, so maybe this is a good place to stop. Okay, because even though we started a few seconds later, this is a good place to stop in the quality of eichus, because as I said, it's going to be a rather large quality, and it's good as we handle it as one whole unit. Okay, so let's stop at this point, and we'll wish you a good vach, and we'll be ready now for starting our second shiur. Okay, obviously, I'm just going to continue now with a little break.
Yeah, you continue.
Okay.
So Kenyan is going to be a part of Echos because there's Kenyan that's also listed as one of the 9 categories of Chalkei HaMikra.
Yeah. Okay. So now you notice it's good that you brought this up. We're going to have words in one that we're going to have certain things that don't exist in other places and certain words that have been changed. For instance, here, this in our 9 concepts, he calls it ono, and there he's going to call it makom. Okay? So what we'll do is the things that are similar, I'm going to use one book as a parish of the other one, and then when we get to a place like ono or kinyan, which exists here, and how is that different from this kinyan? Okay, we'll then compare the two. Okay, but that's actually within the same book. So you're actually asking very good. This is a kinyan as an echus, and okay. So we'll see. Let's go slowly in that discussion here. Okay. Let's do the second book. Now see it. I don't see it. I see join the meeting. Did I shut it? No, I couldn't. Wow. I don't see that. Oh, there it is. I got it. Okay. I wish we could just edit some of the, the junk at the end of it also. Okay, stop recording.